All right, ready to dive into today's market wrap-up.
Always.
We're looking at the closing report from Market Deep Dive, December 3rd, 2024.
December already.
I know, right? Feels like the year just flew by.
It does.
Everyone's kind of holding their breath, see what the Fed's going to do next.
Yeah, it's a nail biter for sure. Trying to decipher what it all means for our portfolio.
Exactly. And today was a bit of a head-scratcher. NASDAQ closed up.
Oh, yeah.
But when you look a little closer, it's mostly thanks to a few of those mega-cap tech giants.
I see. So not a broad market rally?
Nope. Most other stocks were either flat or even down a bit. What do you think's going on there?
Well, could be a sign investors are getting a little spooked, retreating to what they see as safe havens.
Like those big familiar tech names.
Exactly. Remember earlier this year we saw that broadening market trend, gains spread across different sectors.
Yeah, that was a good run.
This might be a shift away from that, back to like that comfort zone of the mega caps.
So it's kind of like everyone's crowding under the same umbrella during a sudden downpour, even though it might not protect them from everything.
That's a great analogy. Exactly.
But then, to make things even more interesting, the JOLTS report came out today.
Job openings?
Job openings and labor turnover survey. Yeah. Showed more job openings than expected. On the surface, sound pretty positive, right?
More jobs, more opportunity.
What's not to like?
Well, the Fed might not be celebrating just yet.
Why is that?
They're trying to cool down the economy, right? Fight inflation.
Right.
A hot job market makes that tougher. Like they're trying to lower the temperature, but the job market keeps turning up the thermostat.
I get it. A bit of a dilemma.
Yeah.
But there was another interesting thing in that JOLTS data, wasn't there?
Let me think. Oh, the quits rate.
Right, the quits rate.
That jumped up. The highest it's been since last May.
What does that tell us?
Well, it tells us a lot about worker sentiment, actually. Workers are feeling confident. They're not afraid to quit their jobs.
Yeah, they must be seeing better opportunities out there.
Exactly. It all points to a tight labor market, which, again, could feed those inflationary pressures the Fed's trying to tame.
It's a good news, bad news kind of thing.
Yeah.
Good for workers, maybe not so good for the Fed's inflation fight.
Right.
And speaking of things that might be keeping the Fed up at night, earnings season has officially begun.
It has. And kicking things off, we've got Salesforce reporting after the close today.
Oh, yeah.
Big focus is going to be on their AI strategy. Everyone's watching that.
Ah, AI, the buzzword that never sleeps. Why is Salesforce's approach to AI so crucial, especially with everything else going on?
Well, it could be a window into the future of mega cap dominance, really. A lot of their market outperformance, it's been fueled by huge earnings growth.
Makes sense.
But what if AI starts to disrupt their business models rather than just enhance them? That could shake things up.
So tonight's earnings call, it's not just about Salesforce's numbers. It's about whether mega caps can keep growing in this age of AI. And then, of course, we're still waiting on those big jobs numbers.
Friday. Right.
Coming out Friday, yep. And we've got the potential for fiscal policy changes on the horizon, too.
Government spending, tax adjustments, all that.
Yeah, all of it adds up to a whole lot of uncertainty for the market.
Definitely keeps things interesting.
And you know what else is interesting? Consumers were out in force over the Thanksgiving weekend.
Oh, yeah. I saw that.
Didn't seem to be tightening their belts much, despite all this economic uncertainty.
It is a bit of a contradiction, isn't it? Are consumers just feeling really optimistic about the future?
Or are we going to see a surge in inflation later on?
Good question. That's the million-dollar question.
Okay, so to recap, we've got mega caps maybe making a comeback, a labor market sending mixed signals, earnings season starting with a focus on AI, and consumers defying expectations. My head's spinning.
I hear you. It's a lot to digest.
It is.
And don't forget the Federal Reserve.
Right.
We've got like 12 Fed speakers taking the stage this week.
12. Seriously?
Yep, including Powell himself tomorrow.
Wow. So what are we expecting to hear from them? Any hints about interest rates?
Well, it's a tough spot they're in, trying to support the economy but also keep inflation in check.
Right.
I wouldn't expect any big reveals before those jobs numbers on Friday.
Makes sense.
But we'll be listening closely, that's for sure. Any little shift in tone, any hint about their thinking.
So it's all about reading between the lines this week.
You got it. And let's dig a little deeper into some of these market trends, shall we?
Sounds good to me. Where should we start?
Well, how about we go back to that NASDAQ thing for a second?
Okay, the mega caps driving most of the gains.
Right. That potential shift back towards, what did we call it? Flight to safety.
Yeah, flight to safety. Like, investors are running for cover when things get rough. But does that really work long term?
That's a great question. And it kind of ties into earnings season kicking off. Salesforce, they reported after the bell yesterday. And, well, everyone's really focused on their AI strategy.
Right, AI. It's everywhere these days. But remind me, why is Salesforce's AI game plan so important in the big picture?
It's like a sneak peek into the future,
Yeah.
specifically the future of mega cap growth. A lot of their success, it's been driven by, well, massive earnings growth.
Makes sense. Tech companies growing fast, big earnings.
Exactly. But what happens if AI starts messing with their business models instead of helping them?
Ah, I see. So it's not just about Salesforce using AI. Well, it's about whether AI could totally disrupt the whole mega cap dominance thing.
You got it. If those big companies can't keep those earnings growing like they have been, the whole market landscape could shift.
And that brings us back to Friday, right? Those jobs numbers.
A big one.
We got a taste with the Jolties report. Job openings are up. Good for job seekers, but maybe not so good for the Fed fighting inflation.
Exactly. Strong job market keeps that inflation pressure cooking. But hey, remember that other interesting bit from Jolts? The quits rate.
Right. People feeling confident enough to quit their jobs, probably looking for something better.
Exactly. Tight labor market, employers gotta compete for talent, and that can mean higher wages, which then feeds inflation.
So it's like good news, bad news, all mixed together.
It is. A real tug of war. Positive signs like job openings, confident workers, but then the potential downside of, well, more inflation.
Like trying to juggle chainsaws. Speaking of which, we mentioned the terminal rate earlier. What does that even mean for our listeners who aren't, finance experts?
Oh, good point. The terminal rate. It's basically where the market thinks the Fed will stop cutting interest rates. Imagine it's like the destination on a road trip. Right now, the market's expecting rate cuts, but not as low as everyone thought at first.
Why not? Is the market, like, losing faith in the Fed?
Not necessarily. It's more like taking in new information. We've
Yeah.
got those fiscal policy changes coming up.
Government spending, tax stuff, right?
Yeah. And those things, they can affect inflation. The market's just trying to figure all that out.
So it's like the market's saying, hold on, Fed.
Mhm.
We hear you on the rate cuts, but let's see what the government does first.
Exactly. And then there's this weird disconnect, right, between the strong economic data we're seeing and the Fed saying things are cooling down.
Yeah, job openings beating expectations, consumer spending like crazy. Doesn't sound very cooled down to me.
Right. It's making the market hesitate. Like, prove it, Fed. Show us the economy's really slowing before you go cutting rates too much.
Show me the money. Now, to add another layer to all this, consumers went on a shopping spree over Thanksgiving weekend. What's up with that?
Yeah, that was interesting to see, wasn't it? I mean, is it a good sign? Or are we just setting ourselves up for more inflation headaches down the line?
$1 million questions for sure.
They are. And it makes you realize it's not just about how much people are spending, but what they're buying. Essentials, experiences, big ticket items.
Oh, I see what you mean. The spending patterns themselves could tell us a lot about where things are going.
Exactly. So let's recap. Mega caps may be making a comeback, labor market sending mixed signals, earnings season focused on AI, and consumers doing their own thing.
A lot going on.
It is. And let's not forget the Fed. 12 speakers this week, Powell included. What are we hoping they'll tell us?
Spill the beans on interest rates, maybe.
Well, they got to be careful, right? Balance supporting the economy with keeping inflation under control. I wouldn't hold my breath for any huge announcements before Friday's jobs report.
Okay, so no crystal ball predictions.
Not yet. But every word they say, the tone they use, it all matters. We'll be analyzing everything.
Reading between the lines.
You got it. And that's where you, our listeners, come in. You're part of this deep dive, too. We've given you the context, the data, the expert take. Now it's your turn. Connect the dots, do your own research, draw your own conclusions.
We're all market detectives here.
Exactly. And remember, the more informed you are, the better equipped you are to make smart decisions. Stay curious, stay engaged, stay ahead of the curve.
Love it. But before we move on, one last thing to think about. We've talked a lot about spending being up, but what are people actually buying?
Right. Are they treating themselves to experiences, stocking up on necessities, or splurging on the latest gadgets? Those answers, they can tell us a lot about the economy and where it's headed.
Fascinating. So pay attention to what you see people buying this week. You might be surprised by what you learn. And who knows, you might even find some investment ideas along the way. Okay, so we've been through a lot. Mega caps, jobs, that crazy Thanksgiving shopping rush.
Phew. Yeah. It's been a busy week for sure.
Definitely a lot to process. So as we wrap things up here, What are the big takeaways? If our listeners only could remember a few things, what should they be?
Hmm. Well, first off, I'd say we're in a wait and see kind of market right now. Everyone's holding their breath, waiting for the Fed to, make some pronouncements. And of course, those jobs numbers on Friday,
Yes, Friday is going to be interesting.
big time. But even while we're waiting, there's been some pretty interesting stuff happening under the surface. Those hints about mega caps maybe coming back strong, that disconnect between the strong economy and the Fed's cooling narrative,
Yeah.
and then consumers just spending away.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle with all these different pieces. But I think we've given our listeners the tools to start putting it together.
Definitely. We've laid out the context, the key data points, tried to share some insights. Now it's their turn to dig in, do some more research, and come to their own conclusions.
Exactly. Be your own market detective. And remember, the more you know, the better decisions you can make. But before we go, one last thing to think about. We keep saying spending is up, but what are people actually spending their money on?
Right. That's the real question. Are they buying experiences, stocking up on essentials? Or are they all about the latest tech gadgets? The answers can tell us a lot about where the economy is headed.
So pay attention to what people are buying this week. It might surprise you. And who knows, you might even find some good investment ideas along the way.
You never know.
That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring.